Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments, such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org. Idaho lost more than 2,000 farms over a 5-year period. Idaho Matters wants to know how that's impacting farmers, cities, and counties. Listen to our series on farming called Land and Legacy. Episodes available on Monday afternoons through November 17th in the Idaho Matters podcast feed. More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Cadet. Few composers have impacted American music in the way George Gershwin has. His ability to blend classical and popular jazz rhythms created an unforgettable sound that would later make him a household name. And this Thursday, Dr. Del Parkinson, a distinguished professor of piano in the Department of Music at Boise State University, will be exploring Gershwin's legacy and music in a lecture with the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. And he's joining us now for a preview. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So can we start our conversation today by you telling us just a little bit more about Gershwin and who he was?
So Gershwin was an amazing person who had musical gifts that are almost beyond comprehension. I think one of the major differences between Gershwin and just about every other composer is that he had very, very little instruction. He's the type of person that learned by doing. And instead of taking, years of lessons on any instrument or lessons in how to compose or how to conduct, he just, as I said, he learned by doing, by observing others, by looking at scores of other composers, and it's pretty phenomenal what he was able to accomplish.
That's really incredible. So where did he then get his start as a composer, in particular, without having had a lot of formal instruction?
Okay, great question. Well, all right, so just to give you an idea, he didn't have piano lessons, but piano was his main instrument, and he was a fabulous pianist. He gave lots of performances, and he learned how to play the piano by watching piano rolls in the old player pianos. And similarly, then he got a job 4 years after starting on the piano as what's called a song plugger. And so he played newly composed sheet music of the day in the publishers, let's say their main stores in New York City. And it was through playing music of other composers every day that he figured out how to compose initially, that is, popular music, and then he transitioned into Broadway, and then he transitioned into classical. So one thing led to another, and as I said, no formal instruction in any of that.
Wow. Okay, so Gershwin wrote all the music for the film An American in Paris. Talk to us a little bit about how he made this switch, as you said he was in Broadway, to film.
Exactly. Well, he was one that nothing seemed impossible or I think even difficult to him. So, for example, when he first started writing Broadway shows, which he wrote throughout the 1920s until the stock market crash, he didn't know how to orchestrate yet. And again, he later learned how to do that just on his own. And so by the time he wrote American in Paris, he knew how to orchestrate. He'd figured it out. And so that is entirely his composition. Nobody was hired to change, what he initially, when he was writing for Broadway, he would write it for a piano score, and then somebody else would be hired to write it out for the orchestra. Well, American in Paris is entirely his. And it's a very cool story. He traveled to Paris on a few occasions, and he was just enamored of the taxi horns. And so one trip that he went there, he brought back 4 taxi horns on the airplane. I don't know what TSA would say about that. I know. And so he included that in the score. And so you hear pretty early on in American in Paris these taxi horns. And whenever an orchestra performs American in Paris, they have to usually, unless they own these, it's an instrument that simulates the sound of taxi horns. They have to rent them, and they're very available to rent. So, but yeah, he of course composed all the music to it, and it's about an American wandering around Paris and taking in the sights and sounds, and of course, what it is actually sort of autobiographical, if you will. So he's the American, and it's very cool because he incorporates jazz into it. He incorporates the blues and a lot of music that was written in the other types of music that were written in the 1920s.
So he really blended classical and jazz music in a way that no one else had before him. Why, in your
Absolutely, and
opinion? Yeah, so why was this so revolutionary?
because nobody else did it. So, for example, it's true. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, but everybody else, I guess, seemed to fit into categories. They were either classical, or they were Broadway, or they were pop, or they were jazz. And he just put it all together. He just incorporated all of them, and it was his. Well, for example, when he wrote an Rhapsody in Blue, which of course is the most frequently played piece of classical music ever written, it was premiered in a concert that was kind of like an early version of America's Got Talent. So it was to show the world that America had finally arrived on the classical music scene. And it was being judged by a panel of 12 very distinguished judges, very wonderful musicians of the era. And so it was a very long concert, about 3 hours, and the audience was growing very restless. George's piece was the next to the last on the program, and as I said, the audience was weary. But the moment that piece started, everybody sat on the edge of their seats, and it was such a fresh sound. They'd never heard anything like it. And it was exactly the reason that you just mentioned, the fact that it wasn't just classical or just jazz or just Broadway or just pop, but an amalgamation of those styles. And that's why it's so beloved by everybody. Everybody can relate to it because, I understand that everybody has a different style of music that they love, but this one brings in everyone.
So I understand when you give your presentation this coming Thursday, you're actually going to be doing a live performance as well. So can you tell us what piece you might be playing?
Oh, yes. So typically for presentations, I do the same thing that I do for concerts, which is that I prepare a PowerPoint presentation, and so the delivery is that I of course talk about the music, talk about the composer, and show PowerPoint slides while I'm at it. And then I play musical examples to illustrate. And I play full pieces. I don't just play little snippets. So that's the way it'll be. I'll be performing Gershwin's 3 preludes, several song transcriptions, including Embraceable You and I Got Rhythm, excerpt from Porgy and Bess, and concluding with Rhapsody in Blue.
So I have less than a minute left with you, but I would love to know what you hope people take away from your lecture on Thursday.
Would you ask me again? Sorry.
So really quickly, I have less than a minute with you. What do you hope the takeaway is for folks who come to your lecture this week?
Well, first of all, sheer enjoyment of music, because music is its own language, but also an appreciation for a man who, without instruction, without formal instruction, just created in 38 short years. He died at age 38. Just an incredible amount of amazing music.
Well, I want to thank you so much. It has been a delight to talk with you about this. We've been speaking with Dr. Del Parkinson. He is professor of piano in the Department of Music at Boise State University. And we've been talking the life and the music of George Gershwin. And Dr. Parkinson will be speaking more about Gershwin this Thursday at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute in Boise. That will begin at 1:30 p.m. You've been listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. I'm Gemma Gaudette.
Sources and methods, the crown jewels of the intelligence community. Shorthand for how do we know what's real? Who told us? If you have those answers, you're on the inside, and NPR wants to bring you there. From the Pentagon to the State Department to spy agencies, listen to understand what's really happening and what it means for you. Sources and Methods, the new national security podcast from NPR.